go. Hi. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Are we in here? Okay. Microphone, check. Hello. Weekly stream is live. Come hang. YouTube.com live. Hello, everybody. What's up, Steven? Pete, Snapple, and Cats, Eternal Pessimist. How are you guys doing? Stream is a little bit later than normal today. I feel like I slept a little later than normal, which is weird because I didn't stay up that late. I did not catch the St. Patrick's Day parade in New York. I didn't even know that that was a thing. My St. Patrick's Day was very chill. I went to the grocery store and played some video games. That's about it. And I just sat around and watched YouTube until I fell asleep. Normally in the past, I think this is the first year that I haven't gone out on St. Patrick's Day in a long time. But I'm at a point now where, like, just the whole chaos of, you know, drinking holidays is kind of unappealing to me these days, which is interesting because I never thought I would be like that, because I've always really liked, you know, I like to party. Well, I used to like to party at least. But now I'm just like, I don't want to deal with all these crazy people. Like, I like hanging out with people that I like and know. I don't want to be in a crowd of drunk strangers. I should have threw a party. Maybe that's what I'll do next time. That's what I should do on holidays. Instead of going out, just throw a party and invite your friends. I'm a very social person. I like to be around people, but when everyone is super drunk and there's just a ton of people, it's just obnoxious. It's just not even fun. Like, I love going to a bar and the bar's like basically dead. There's like maybe like 10 people there total, and it's like quiet, and you can just chill with your friends or have a interesting conversation with the bartender. That's like ideal for me. I wasn't always like that though. I used to really like going out and just going ham and just fucking huge crowds and meeting everybody and all that stuff. But it's kind of obnoxious these days. I think part of it is because I don't drink as much as I used to. Because like back in the day, I would just be one of those super drunk people acting stupid. But now I'm almost always less drunk than everybody else. Like, I'll have a few drinks. I like to get a buzz, but I can't drink as much as I used to for various reasons. Such as my hangovers are really bad these days. So for all of you who are drinkers and you're still young, that's something you may have to look forward to, is your hangovers just suddenly becoming unbearable. Another reason is it's very expensive to go out and drink. It's kind of ridiculously expensive. And I had to stop spending all my money on that. But anyway, usually when I'm out, I'm less drunk than everybody else. And so I'm more aware of how obnoxious everybody is. Yeah. I think the hangovers in and of themselves are a very good reason to avoid drinking or to limit drinking. Especially if you have them as bad as I do. Like, if I pace myself, it's fine. But sometimes it's hard to pace yourself. You don't get the appeal of alcohol? What's up, disconcerted Ravenclaw? I mean, it's pretty simple. Drinking alcohol makes you feel good. That's like pretty much, it's not that it's not that difficult to understand. And it makes you more social. It makes you more like appreciative of stuff. Electric Lomain, thank you for the 444. What was the last cool thing you saw on YouTube? The last cool thing I saw on YouTube. I saw this video earlier today, actually, called Every State in the United States, I think it's called. You may have seen it. It went kind of viral. It's got like 5 million views. But it's really just an informative video with like interesting facts about every state. It's really cool. And it's like very well made, well produced. You guys should check it out. But I don't. There are lots of things that make you feel good, so it's like, I don't. There's no necessity of drinking alcohol. Like, I don't think anyone needs to do it, but it just makes you feel good. Some people drink alcohol as sort of like a coping mechanism or as a way to forget their worries, and I don't really do it like that. And I'm kind of like hesitant to agree with that mindset, because it seems like it's potentially destructive. I just do it to have a good time. It makes me happy. Well, I mean, in terms of like being high or intoxicated, it kind of depends on what kind of high it is. Like, marijuana high is like very different from like being drunk, which is very different from like, being on LSD, for example. So I plan on breaking up with my girlfriend today. I'm super nervous. Any advice for me? Um, I don't know. I've actually never broken up with someone before. I've always been dumped. But I think really just, I don't know, just be nice. Don't be an asshole about it. But it's probably not going to be a pleasant experience, and it's probably going to be very awkward. And I don't think there's anything you can do to avoid that. But I would just say make sure you don't do or say anything that you're going to regret later. Because sometimes when people break, I don't know if this is your plan, but sometimes when people break up with people, they just start being mean, basically. They say, you're this, you're that, you're the worst. Was that another donation, or was that the same super chat? Electric One Man. Let me see. Or at least that's what's happened to me. Just wanted to see my name on both sides of the stream, that's all. It didn't pop up. I think the super chat thing might be messed up. I'm not sure. But it did pop up for the other one. But anyway, I appreciate the donation, as always. Have you ever tried to learn another language? I've tried. I've been trying to learn Spanish literally my whole life. I'm just really bad at keeping up with it. But that is definitely a thing that I want to do, is learn at least one more language, if not several. Spanish is the one that I want to learn the most. And I know a little bit of Spanish, but not well enough to actually like call myself a Spanish speaker. But yeah, like the last person who broke up with me, they decided that was their time to just air out all of their grievances, which is like, at that point it's too late. And at that point, you're just being mean. But I also would say, like, don't lie. And don't like BS them. Just like be real. Like the whole sort of it's not you, it's me type of shit. It's like, that's probably not true. I'd like to learn sign language. I was going to try to study sign language, but I realized that it is just as hard as learning any other language. I was thinking that it might be easier, but it's kind of just as hard. Well, any language, you can always find people online to talk to. And there are like websites that like, facilitate conversations with other people, which I guess is kind of awkward, but I mean, if you really want to learn. I'd like to learn Spanish, and the other languages that I've been interested in are German and Korean. So that's like my top 3 languages that I want to learn. And then from there, I'd like to learn whatever. Like, there's a there's a actual polyglot community on YouTube, just like any other community. Polyglot meaning a person who can speak many languages, and they're all like really interesting, and they all give tips on how they learn languages quickly and stuff like that. And it's really interesting to watch, and they're very inspiring. I was really into it for a while when I was like trying to study these languages, and there's some really good teaching videos on YouTube. And like there's this YouTuber called I think it's called Sweet and Tasty. She's a pretty popular Korean YouTuber, and her channel is all about educating people about the Korean language and Korean culture, and it's like really cool. And that I sort of have followed that channel since it was really small, and now it's like almost 1 million subscribers, I think. Are you doing any conferences or trips outside of? I imagine that means supposed to be Bama this year. Um, I don't know. I don't have any plans right now. It just kind of depends on my funds. Like I would love to go to VidCon if I have saved up enough money by the time VidCon happens, then I'll definitely go. But it's pretty expensive thing to do. I mean, I want to go to all of the conferences and conventions. Like I want to go to everything. It's just expensive. ASL is great. I think it should be required, to be honest. It's kind of much harder for a deaf person to lip read and speak than it is for a hearing person to learn ASL. I guess so. I don't know. I wouldn't have guessed that, but maybe. I guess it makes sense. Yeah, I think you do have to sort of pick. But here's the thing. If you really put your mind to it, you can become competent in a language pretty quickly. And that's how these, and I know this because I follow all these polyglots. So, okay, there the super chat just popped up. Okay. I guess I think this thing's is still in beta. Like this overlay thing it was meant for Twitch, and then they release it for YouTube, but I think the YouTube version is still in beta, so there's probably some kinks. But yeah, these people like they'll like spend not even a year. Like the people that are really good at it, they can learn the basics of a language in like 6 months or less. And from there, they can be like, okay, I want to go more deep into it. Or they can be like, hey, I can speak this language with people now. Now I'm just going to move on to something else. I think that part of the problem with people is they kind of desire this sort of perfection of speaking where they're not satisfied until they like know all the vocab and all the grammar. And that's what slows people down. But these people, like, as long as they can have a conversation with you, even if you're like messing up everything, that's all they care about. All they care about is being able to communicate. How's the new computer funding coming along? It's going pretty well. I've sold a bunch of wristbands. I think I'm gonna wait until the end of the month just to see what all I've collected and just see what I can get, because obviously the more money I raise, the better system I could get, and I want to get the best I can get, I guess. I don't need like some fucking new age top of the line computer. I just need something that can handle what I want to do. But obviously the more I get, the better I can get. And I've also gotten some pretty generous donations towards it as well. Have I thought about Bitcoin mining? I mean, mining Bitcoin is just something that is probably not feasible for me. It's just not a profitable thing to do unless you've got like, the very best hardware and you have like, you know, multiple systems running. It's just not really a feasible thing to do. Like even just the power bill won't make up for, you know, won't make up for the cost, or won't cover how much Bitcoin you're getting. How do you feel about friendships that are only through the internet? Do you think they have any more or less potential for meaningful relationships than in person? Well, I mean, I don't think they're less meaningful. Any you know, I think a friendship through the internet can be just as meaningful as a friendship offline. I don't see any reason why not. Just kind of depends on the people, I guess. What's up, Debo? I know for relationships, like romantic relationships, it can vary from person to person. Like I'm really bad at sort of long distance relationships because I'm a very like touch oriented person, and it would be very hard for me to deal with that. Like I don't think I could actually deal with that. Um, Annabelle, thank you for the comment. For example, I have a pretty good friend mainly through the internet. I've met them once, and I've known them for like maybe 4 or 5 years, and I would say that we're pretty good friends. And we've had some very like meaningful, deep conversations. We like, you know, we do, you know, Skype each other and stuff like that all the time. And it's just a friendship, like it's not a romantic relationship. And I think it's fine. Thank you for the super chat, $4.99, Debo Molina, hashtag get that computer. Appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. By the way, you guys can check the description of the video if you'd like to, if you want to understand what the difference between super chats and donations are. They're similar, but they're not the same. Another way you can support me is by buying a T1J coffee mug or whatever mug. It has T1J on one side and my face on the other side. You can get them at theonejanitor.com/store. I don't really like to be alone, so I really value, you know, time spent with friends, even if it is online. Honestly, like hanging out with people, especially if you have the ability to video chat someone, like it's almost the same. Like I've had like hangouts with people through the internet where we like, you know, we both get a drink and we just kind of chill there. Sometimes even like watch a TV together or something through the internet. The only issue would be, like I was saying before, is if you are like a touch oriented person, if you're an affectionate person, like that can be hard to deal with. Like I don't think I could date someone through the internet. But some people can. Some people are not as affectionate or don't require touch to the same degree, or some people are, but they can deal with it. All right, Electrolo, man, thank you for coming to the stream as always, and thank you for the donations. Can you be in love with someone you've only interacted with online? I think you can. I don't see any reason why not. If you could move anywhere, where would you go? I don't know. I've been really digging Japan lately. But eventually eventually my plan is to move somewhere. But I have to do more research about that. Internet made it easier. What kind of people you'd rather be friends with rather than the awkward is she or he cool wait time it usually takes. Yeah, for sure. You can definitely sort of curate who you interact with on the internet rather than just sort of going outside and just randomly meeting people and hoping that they're not terrible. Have I helped other YouTubers lately like ContraPoints? What is it? What do you mean by that? Help them how? What did she do? Or what do you are you I don't know what you mean. Like doing little voices or some bit roll. Oh, no. Not recently. I have some collaborations coming up though. Yeah, I was trying to remember the last time I did that. Actually, maybe the last time I like sort of was a guest in someone's video may have been ContraPoints. I did a collab with the Newsbroke channel, but that was like maybe a year ago, I think. What's some favorite music? I don't know. I just listen to music that I liked growing up. I don't keep up with new music that much. So I listen to like Outkast and Nirvana and like fucking System of a Down. What do you think of the idea of cultural appropriation? Do you agree, disagree with it all, or there's certain points you agree with, others you don't? Well, I did a whole video about this. I wonder if I need to revisit it. Um, My favorite Outkast album is actually Speaker Box, The Love Below. So good. Aquemini second though. I don't know. The thing about, I think I have a more nuanced opinion about cultural appropriation than a lot of social justice people. Because in my opinion, like, you know, if you like something, then it's fine. And like, I don't care. Like a lot of people ask me, like, what do you think about white people that have dreadlocks? And it's like, I don't care. Why do I care? Why would I care about that? Like, if you like dreadlocks, then get dreadlocks. Like, who gives a shit? You're allowed to like stuff, which is basically sort of that was like the mantra of the video I made on this is you're allowed to like stuff. The problem is there's like different caveats to it though. Like, if you're like making fun of people, if you're doing something to mock a culture or something, obviously that's not good. Or if you're sort of like using a culture, making use of another culture for your own purposes without really, respecting the origin of it, that can be pretty problematic. And also you have to sort of internalize and understand what you're doing especially like as a privileged person that's taking advantage or that's using something from a marginalized culture. Like at the very least, you need to understand, the implications of that. So like, for example, if you're a white person that has dreadlocks, you should understand that black people who have dreadlocks, we're seen as like, when we have dreads, we're seen as like, less professional, less attractive, less, safe, things like that. And it doesn't often apply in the same way to like white people or other races. And I think you need to like keep that in mind. Like it's often funny how some white celebrity can adopt this style or tradition from another culture, and everyone's like, oh, that's so cool, she's doing it, so she's pulling it off. And then, but it's like, yeah, we've been doing that our whole existence, and you never thought it was cool when we did it. But at the end of the day, it's like, you're allowed to like stuff. Like if you like something from another culture, then fucking, I don't care. Like, I don't like the idea of things being sacred or things being exclusive. Like I don't think that's not my jam. And also, like, most things we do are borrowed from other cultures anyway. Like some people get get super like annoyed or critical whenever someone that isn't black makes black music, and it's like, well, if they like it, then who cares? Like a white person who's doing rap, or a Hispanic person who's doing R&B or something like that. It's like they're allowed to like the music, and they're allowed to make it if they like it. Like, I don't. But like I was saying, sometimes people don't really respect the art form, and they don't respect the history. And that's pretty annoying. But that's, at the end of the day, I don't care, Like, for example, there was a thing about Post Malone recently, who, if you don't know, is a white rapper was talking about how, like, there's nothing real in hip hop right now or something like that, which is like actually ridiculous. Like there's so much rap music out there that's like substantive and has a lot to say. But from my perspective, it just seemed like there's this white dude who sort of adopted this culture but doesn't really know about it, but now he's trying to speak as if he's like an expert on it, and that's pretty annoying. But at the end of the day, I believe that Post Malone likes rap music, and he's allowed to like it, and he's allowed to make it. So whatever. Have I kept up with Big Boy's solo work? A little bit, yeah. It's good. It's all good, from what I've heard. Is it really okay to call some genre of music black music? Yeah, I mean, if black people invented it. And it's like, if it like literally, if the music literally reflects the black experience, then yeah, sure. It's the same thing as calling music, like saying something is Latin music, or like Chinese music. Same thing, really. Do you have a favorite internet memory from the early 2000s? I don't know if I can have a favorite. The early 2000s. There's a lot. I mean, the early 2000s is like really nostalgic point for me. Because that's when I was like really starting to get into the internet. That's when like flash videos were really popular. And like some of those early websites like realultimatepower.net or I think it's .net. And like stuff like that. Boxy. All that junk. A lot of American music has its roots in black music. Indeed, indeed, indeed. That's true. But I mean, a lot of it has evolved for sure. For example, I think most people agree that rock and roll is if not evolved from, was directly invented by black people. But like fucking heavy metal, for example, I wouldn't call that black music. Definitely inspired by black music, but it's an evolution from rock and roll. But I would still say that rap music is black music. And when I say black music, I'm not saying like black people own it or it's exclusive to black people. It's just the history and the nature of the music. And maybe one day hip hop music will evolve away from being black music in the same way that rock and roll did. Seems unlikely though, because black people have a much louder voice now, and they probably wouldn't want that to happen. And most people who participate in the music who aren't black are usually pretty respectful to the culture. Not always. How do you deal with living with people who have really out there right-wing views? I don't know. I don't interact with too many people that have right-wing views, like really out there right-wing views. I'm not even sure what you mean by really out there right-wing views. But my goal, my strategy in life is if someone wants to have a civil conversation about anything, then I'm down. It doesn't matter what your views are. If you're saying just like outright like bigoted shit, then I'm just gonna sort of remove you from my life, I think. And if you're just being an asshole about what you're saying, then I just don't want to talk to you, and I don't hang out with you. Just ignore you. But if you're like a conservative and you want to have an honest, civil conversation, then I don't have a problem with that. I did not hear about Andy Worski. I try not to follow news about people like that these days. Well, I don't try not to, but I don't really go out of my way to find these things. For me, the appropriation bit has to do with financial or social exploitation in an unbalanced way that's not shared. I mean, I guess to an extent. I really hope that doesn't happen to hip hop, although IMO hip hop is voiced for marginalized, so it's likely, I think. I don't know. I just feel like as long as the music is authentic and it's not like exploitative, then I just don't care. Like I'm okay with the natural evolution to hip hop music and other music being more inclusive of other cultures and being more representative of other cultures. And it's already kind of like that. But the problem is when it becomes exploitative and like obviously inauthentic, and I think that's where the problem is. Right. That's it. That's the reason why I don't think it will happen in the same way as rock and roll, because back in the day it was very easy to marginalize black people and just pretend that they didn't exist. You can't really do that now. Well, if you're in a position where you can't like ignore someone, then that's just a thing. There's no easy answer. Sometimes you just have to survive. Sometimes you just have to make it through the day. Because I don't know the exact situation. But like for example, my parents were like that, and I know you said you're not independent, but I would just do my best to limit my interactions with them. But if you can't, I don't know what to tell you. You just have to survive and take a deep breath. Gotta stay hydrated, guys. We're seeing a huge boom of new voices. There's a lot more queer rappers out there, a lot more Asian rappers. Yeah, and I'm okay with that. I like that. But the thing is, most of those rappers, I'm not familiar with all of them, but most of them respect the history of the art form, and that's cool. Like it goes both ways, like if I decided that I wanted to make fucking merengue music, I could do that if I liked it, and it was just something I was into. But I feel like it would be my responsibility to just be respectful of where it came from, and not to pretend like it's some new shit that I made up or that I'm taking over. What's up, one vampy night? Why do you think people are so scared of multiculturalism when America is already so diverse? Well, America's diverse, but it's still very segregated. Everyone sort of goes off to their own corner for the most part. And that's interesting to me. I've always found it interesting that America is one of the most diverse countries in the world, but still one of the most racist and xenophobic. But maybe that shouldn't be surprising. Because what has ended up happening is people sort of separate into their own societies, and all the black people live together, and all the Latino people live together, and all the white people live together, and so they're just kind of side-eyeing each other from their own corners. But I wonder, because a lot of other countries that are more homogenous, they seem more progressive, but I wonder if they would remain that progressive if all of a sudden there was a huge influx of immigration, from a different, culture or something. Would they be the same? I don't know. We're not the most xenophobic, but we're up there. I think there are a few developed countries that have some issues with racism, to the same extent or to a higher extent than America, but not many. Like from what I understand, it's pretty bad in Australia. S- a certain amount of marginalization, so they're naturally gravitated to using hip hop as a platform. Yeah, that makes sense. That can, that really sort of can explain why certain people um, gravitate towards hip hop. But part of the culture of hip hop has not been this perfect culture, and I think that's what's interesting. Like hip hop in general has been pretty sexist and homophobic over the years, I would say. And so, that's probably why it's taken so long for a lot of LGBT type people to get to really embrace it. Like we have a history of welcoming immigrants. We have a history of welcoming certain types of immigrants. But I think that a lot of this has been a very concerted effort on the part of basically Republicans, I guess more broadly, like far right conservatives, to sort of rile up their base and give scapegoats for people's problems, and to get like conservative white Americans to vote against their own interests because they're convinced that all their problems are caused by other people. And I think part of that plan is this sort of scapegoating of immigrants of color. And we've sort of painted this, I grew up being sort of taught this image of just crazy brown people in the Middle East just shooting and killing each other for no reason. That's basically like the image that we're taught in America. And so like when we learn that they want to come here, that they naturally make you fear that. And maybe it was probably a similar thing before my time with like Irish and Italian and stuff. It was probably like that for them as well. Do you think this tendency for reactionaries to scapegoat the other will die anytime soon? It's hard for me to imagine that it will die, because a lot of it is just human nature. Humans, are afraid of things that are different. I think that's just an inherent thing. We just don't like things that are not different from what we're used to. And also, we don't like to take responsibility for our own problems. So if someone can convince us that it's because of them, it's because they've come over here and they've taken everything that you love, I think that's always going to be convincing to a certain segment of the population. When it comes to homophobia in hip hop, I think it's a sign of the times. Hip hop reflects reality, and thus, because society used to be so much more homophobic, so is hip hop. Kinda. I think a lot of it is just because homophobia is a problem in the black community, and it still is. But that also is because of society. But I think that's one of the it's one of the areas within the mainstream black community that I think has progressed more like slower than it should have. And a lot of it has to do with religion as well. Everything is connected. That's the thing that you learn once you start thinking about these things. It's all one big web. Is it possible to the in group to evolve to incorporate the entire human race, and the other to incorporate things like diseases and hunger? I don't know, that's wishful thinking. The problem is human beings have issues. Human beings themselves get diseases and have poverty and have trouble getting a job, have trouble finding love. Regular people always have those problems, and all it takes is one charismatic person to come and say, hey, none of that is your fault, that's their fault. Even if you completely eliminate income inequality, there's so many things. Like, a lot of this sort of shitlordism on the internet right now is due to, or it's partially involved with people who are disgruntled because women don't like them. And when you convince them, hey, the reason that women don't like you is because feminism, then you can make all these people more, tribalistic in their anti-feminism, and so on and so on. So it's just hard to imagine that that's ever going anywhere. But I don't want that to sound like I'm advocating for apathy, though, because the world obviously gets better. I don't know if you guys know how the world, or even the United States, was, like fucking 500 years ago, but it was worse than it is now. So the world gets better, so it's worth trying to make things better. But I don't think the world will ever be perfect. We're never gonna reach this like blissful utopia. It's just not a thing. Humans are too trash for that. But we can slowly make things better. And 500 years from now, people will have their own issues, but they'll have much better lives than we have. And they probably won't appreciate it, but at least they'll have it. Assuming we don't like actually blow up the world by then, but that won't be our fault. I think we can even make things better for ourselves in this lifetime if we do it the right way. I don't think progress is inevitable at all. I think it requires hard work and smart people. And if the people in charge successfully convince everybody to be apathetic and bitter, then we're doomed. But I don't think that's gonna happen. What the fuck? What is this? But yeah, I don't know. I've seen myself, like, even in my personal life, I think I've become a better person just because of my interactions with people who were smarter than me and had better perspectives than me. And I don't see why that can't happen to other people. So that's why I think it's worth it to try and make things better. And it's not always, sometimes you're going to take 2 steps back before you take a step forward. But, and it's also worth keeping in mind, using the United States as an example, this system is set up to be hard for progress. Like, the way that power works, the way that hierarchies work is if you get too much power, you can rig the system to benefit you, even when your ideas aren't, the majority ideas. And that's what happens. That's what happens in America and probably most countries. So, like, in America, we have the Republicans who have managed to like seize control of the United States for the most part for like the last 30 years. I mean, they haven't always controlled the White House or Congress, but they've always controlled the Supreme Court, which is, arguably the most powerful of the 3 branches. And they've passed some key pieces of legislation that has kept them relevant, even though their ideas continue to become less and less popular. That's why, and this is something I've realized recently, that's why voting is so important. Like I used to not, I used to be really lukewarm about voting. I thought it was dumb. But voting that's how we win, you know? That's how we fucking win. It's just vote. Who do you think will be the next president? There's no way I can know that. It might be Donald Trump. As long as we have the Electoral College, anything can happen. The problem, too, is I talked about this last stream, is we, like, progressives don't really have a party in America. I'm not entirely sure that the majority of Americans are, like, progressives, technically. But progressive thought is definitely, like, on the rise in America. And there's no party that represents progressives. Like, we have the Democrats, which I would probably describe as a neoliberal party. But I'm also not sure if the majority of Americans are neoliberals. Like, I think the majority of Americans are somewhere between progressive and neoliberal, which, like, is arguably a wide gap. But I don't know. I think that people on the left need to start voting more strategically. We just need to stop giving Republicans public office. That's basically what needs to happen. I think the presidential race is a whole different beast, and I think that requires a whole different conversation because of the Electoral College. It just completely throws everything off. So that requires a different strategy, I think. But in terms of, like, local elections, Senate elections, Congress, things like that, just vote. Just go vote, dude. Literally just go vote. And it's possible that there may be some instances where there's a Republican candidate who isn't awful, who doesn't have regressive beliefs. But it's rare. Because the whole, in my opinion at least, this is all my opinion, by the way, my opinion, conservatism is, like, inherently regressive and ridiculous and needs to go away. Needs to its stranglehold on American society and politics needs to be diminished, if not eradicated. There still are a sizable number of conservatives in America. Don't get me wrong, and I don't think that. I don't think we should just be like, fuck them. But there's certain things that I think we need to get rid of. I think there are moderate solutions to some things, but some things are just, have no place in a civil society, Yeah, well, changing attitudes I think that's the biggest thing we need to do, but that just takes longer than changing the law, usually. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of people find, like, activists annoying, but I think activists have been putting in work for the past, like, 10 years or so, and I think they're really changing the world. But anyway, the moral of the story is just vote. Really, just vote. What do you think about Theron Meyer? Well, I have not watched that many of Theron Meyer's videos, but just, seeing her on Twitter and on the internet and stuff, she seems like a decent person. From what I understand, she she's like sort of on this like a lot of her opinions have been changed over time, or at least her opinions have evolved over time. Like she used to be more right wing or something back in the day, but now she's like sort of seeing a lot of the like I don't think she's like calls herself a feminist or anything like that, but I think that she's been sort of her opinions are evolving to be less annoying, basically, is what I think is happening. I don't think conservatism needs to be eradicated, but I think that there are certain aspects of conservatism that just needs to be removed from, you know, the power structures in our society, you know? Like we have to, like, for example, a guy like there are so many Republican political Republican politicians who are basically religious theocrats. That just can't be a thing. That just can't be a thing. You know, you're allowed to be religious and you're allowed to believe these things, but you can't impose your religion on the law. That's just not a thing. That just can't be a thing. So we need to like stop voting for these people, or at least, you know, go out and vote and make sure that they don't win. I sometimes don't want to go in too hard on the Democrats, just because that's what we have, and like they kind of come around eventually. They're just slow about it. But I do think that they're kind of out of touch. And I also think that a lot of things that they tried is not necessarily the people's fault, but also because they've just been out strategized by the Republicans on almost every turn. Cool with a K. Thanks for coming to the stream. Which healthcare would you most likely to see? I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know that. But what I do know is that healthcare shouldn't be a for-profit industry. So I'd be willing to try any form of healthcare that isn't for-profit, and then we'll just see. In my head, in my limited experience, I mean, the idea of single-payer healthcare system provided by the government sounds good to me. But who knows? Maybe something else will work. But what I'm pretty sure of is that it doesn't work if it's for profit. I honestly don't know that much about Connor Lamb. I need to do some more research. Do you think adequate health care should be added to the Bill of Rights? Feels like pretty much all our rights depend on it in a way. I mean, you could add it to the Bill of Rights, but I do think that healthcare should be a right for sure. And I've talked about this before. I don't believe that people actually think that healthcare isn't a right, because that's like profoundly immoral. I think people don't understand the implications of saying that healthcare isn't a right. What's up, Michael? You are new to the channel. Welcome to my channel. Basically, you believe Democrats should run much more conservative candidates. It means getting majority in Congress. I don't think they have to run conservative candidates. I think that's the point that I'm making. I think the candidates that they do run are already too conservative, and that's why a lot of people are disillusioned. I think the success of Bernie Sanders kind of proves that if you can get leftists in America excited, they will support you and go out there and vote. Here, the thing about it is, you just have to get people to vote. Like, I mean, gerrymandering is a thing that we have to tackle. That's a big problem, and that's something, that's a whole nother conversation. But listen, we just elected a Democrat in Alabama. That's unheard of. That's like literally unheard of. And the reason we did that, part of it is because the Republican candidate was so objectionable, but also because people were rallied and excited to actually go and vote and make a difference. You can do that in these conservative districts. You just have to campaign correctly and have candidates that engage people correctly. Because I don't believe that conservatism is the majority mindset in America. I just don't think that's true. I'm not sure that progressivism is either, but Republicans are just much better at strategy, and they've rigged the system in many different ways, such as gerrymandering and voter disenfranchisement, shit like that. So there's a bunch of problems we have to fix. But and I'm okay with there being some conservative representatives, because there are conservatives in America, so they deserve to be represented. But they are vastly overrepresented. That's my view. I could be wrong. All right, Ruish. I feel like I mispronounce it every time. Thank you for coming to the stream. One of the questions from those who oppose healthcare like that is, who will pay for it? Who will pay for it? Who pays for anything? Who pays for education or roads or the military? That's such a weird question. What do you mean, who will pay for it? The question shouldn't be who's going to pay for it. The question should be, okay, let's figure out how to pay for it. Because it should be a given that it's a thing we need. I just never understood that. But that's part of that's part of my issue with America. The mindset in America is just really backwards in many ways. Because people like the idea, if you're like, hey, we're gonna take a little bit more out of your paycheck so that everybody in America can have health care for free. I don't understand how that is objectionable, but that pisses a lot of people off. People don't like the idea of that. And I think a lot of that is because of Republican propaganda. But you shouldn't, that's like good. It's like, oh, that's awesome. I'm okay with that. You mean you're gonna make me pay $30 extra on taxes so everybody gets healthcare? Okay. That's amazing. I mean, who's gonna pay for it? It's the same way we pay for everything else. Wouldn't having a healthy population have economic benefits in itself? I think so, yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing. Who's gonna pay for what we already have? We already spend way too much money on healthcare. That was the thing with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was, you know, he wanted healthcare for all, Medicare for all. And everyone's like, who's going to pay for it, Bernie? And then he's like, yeah, we're going to raise your taxes so we can pay for healthcare. And they're like, well, I don't want my taxes raised. But it's like, you realize you're already paying like fucking $2,000 a month for health insurance, which is less than what you're going to be paying when the taxes get raised. But, you know, a lot of that is just a failure of messaging. I don't think that was really made clear to people. Well, I mean, I think it's true a lot of tax money doesn't help the working class, but that's because we elect people who don't allot the tax money to help them. And a lot of that is going back to what I was saying. The Republicans have convinced a lot of their constituents that the reason that they have issues is not because there's not enough government social programs, but because fucking Mexicans are taking their jobs or something. But again, that's why we vote. Just vote. Just vote better people in with better positions. People that are going to vote for these programs. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe there's just not enough people. Maybe America is majority conservative. In which case, you know, that's sad. But I'm not convinced of that right now. I think that we just have a disenfranchised leftist community in America that has just often felt defeated and just kind of felt like, what's the point? None of these candidates are good anyway. But I think if we can engage people, and I think the success of Bernie Sanders proves that, and the fact that we voted Doug Jones in Alabama, there's just you know, little instances of that I think back the idea that I'm saying. So we'll see. I guess we'll see. I'm very interested to see what's going to happen in 2018 and 2020. But again, the Republicans are good at what they do, and this is something we have to understand. They are good at this game, and they're not going to give up. You know, they're not going to roll over. I think we're split too heavily between urban, suburban, rural areas. It's not right and left, but many rural people believe that the urbanites just don't care if they get screwed. They believe that the urbanites don't care if the rural people get screwed, or the urbanites don't care if they themselves get screwed. But I mean, sort of class has a lot to do with it for sure. I mean, my theory is that a population that is healthy and that is well educated is just going to be better off, and it's going to be better for the economy and better for society. But I'm also convinced that most of our politicians don't really care about what's best for the economy or what's best for the country. I think some of them some of them might care and just might have ideas about that I disagree with, but I think a lot of them just don't care, and they're just doing what benefits them, their lobbyists, their, you know, the people that are taking care of them. They're taking care of those people. And also, some people just have, you know, very strict principles that they follow regardless of whether or not it's actually good for the world or for the country. And that's a problem too. And I think that's kind of one of the main issues with conservatism in general, is this sort of strict adherence to policies, even if they're like demonstrably bad for the world. Yeah, a lot of it is just lack of perspective. Rural white people don't see them as a threat or a problem at all, and the urbanites are screwing them, even though most gun crime is an urban problem. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting example, actually. The gun issue is a very interesting one. I don't even know what the prevailing thought among urban communities is about gun control, because I think a lot of people make the argument that it's like, basically, hey, you know, gun control, that's probably a good idea, but as a marginalized person, you know, gun control only hurts me because I have less means to defend myself. Which is an interesting argument. I don't think it's a good argument, but um, it's an interesting sort of dichotomy where they almost end up favoring the same thing that the poor white gun owners are into. But I have a hard time thinking that, for example, like young black people are gonna come out and you know, demonstrate in opposition to gun control. I think a lot of problems in society come from people only caring about their own perspectives and not thinking about how other people that are different might be affected by the same society. Well, yeah, that's definitely a big thing. That's just a problem with humans in general. That's why listening is such a big thing. You have to like listen to people. And that's why so much of sort of reactionary talking points sort of involve this really heavy cynicism, where it's like, um, you know, things like, you know, virtue signaling, or like, you know, I'm not gonna listen and believe, or like, what, you know, what if they're lying? That, you know, that's sort of a big part of the fucking mythos of, you know, reactionary people, at least online. There's just this heavy cynicism that people are just full of shit every time that they talk about their issues. This, you know, this victim culture, that sort of thing. They just refuse to even consider the possibility that another person's experience is valid just because they're telling you it. It's interesting because when we talk about a lot of these things, I kind of understand it on a deeper level because a lot of these ideas I've, if not had myself, I've definitely like toyed with the ideas myself and thought about them for a long time. I talked a long time ago how I could have ended up being one of these fucking shitlords on the internet. I was very close to becoming that. So I know like all of these arguments they make like intimately because I used to make them. Like this idea, for example, is like, I don't understand that. I don't see how that could be true. So that means it's not true. Obviously, the logical continuation of that is it's not true because I personally don't understand it. But that's not the correct way to be. That's a really big part of being like maturing as a person is understanding that other people have different perspectives than you and just realizing that sometimes you're just not gonna get stuff because it's not your experience. That's a huge thing. A lot of people miss that. A lot of people are like, if I personally can't understand it, then there must be something wrong here. It must not be real. And that's just not right. And I get that, especially, and that's something that I had to struggle with because I sort of pride myself in being good at understanding stuff. Like, I think I'm a fairly intelligent person, so I like figuring stuff out. And so I like to put the pieces together, and if I feel like the pieces don't seem to all be there, I'm like, okay, maybe there's something wrong here. But sometimes it's just not. Sometimes it's just someone else has a different experience than you that you don't have and you may never have. Like, I don't know, a more light example, for example, is I've talked about this, I think, but like asexuality, for example, that's something that like makes no sense to me whatsoever. So like, 10 years ago, I was like, well, that can't be a thing because I don't identify with it at all. It just doesn't make any sense. So obviously asexuals just, they're just not in tune with their emotions correctly, or they just haven't had good sex yet, or they haven't met the right person yet. But eventually you're like, some people just experience the world differently than you. Just have to accept it. I will probably never understand what it's like to be asexual. But for one, it's professionally acknowledged by psychologists and medical people, and that's a big thing too. A lot of these things are actually like acknowledged by actual professionals in the relevant fields, and that's a big thing where people still disagree with stuff, even though it's like sort of the consensus that it's a thing. But even beyond that, if if I'm getting so many people telling me that something is a thing, maybe it's a thing. Like, why would they lie? Like, did they all of the asexuals, did they all get together in a fucking like, you know, chat room and be like, hey, we're gonna make up this thing where we're asexual and we're just gonna spread it? I don't know, that sort of thing. And I'm not saying everything that people say is a thing just because they say it. But eventually you have to you just have to get over yourself. Basically, don't be cynical. Like, be open to the possibility that something you don't understand might be a thing. That doesn't mean it's not a thing. It doesn't mean it is a thing. But I don't think I don't think cynicism should be the default. Isn't that a fallacy by popularity? I mean, not really. If you're the argument is not a lot of people say this, therefore it's true. The argument is a lot of people are independently expressing this experience, which makes it more likely to be true than if that weren't the case. I don't think that's unreasonable. A lot of times people like to throw out these fallacies, but just think for a second, Like, if you go outside and someone's like, "Hey, fucking the Cubs won the World Series." And you're like, "Oh, really?" And then you go to the mall and another random person says, "Hey, the Cubs won the World Series." And then you go to school and then some other unrelated person is like, "The Cubs won the World Series." At that point, you're probably going to be like, "Probably the Cubs won the World Series." Because there's no reason for all of these people to randomly tell me that. The argument is not, a lot of people said that the Cubs won the World Series, therefore it follows that the Cubs won the World Series. The argument is, a lot of people independently made this claim, which makes it more likely to be true than if that didn't happen. Now, it's possible that there's this massive conspiracy, just like I said, like maybe all these people got into a chat room together and decided that they were going to spread the myth that the Cubs won the World Series. But that just seems a little less likely, don't you think? I mean, that stuff happens sometimes. The 4chan people do that. They like to fuck with the internet a lot and spread bullshit. Usually it's pretty obvious bullshit, but sometimes that it's happened. Like you'll see a whole bunch of tweets that say fucking Shaq is dead or something. It's like, wait, Shaq died? Why is everybody saying that Shaq died? But that's why critical thinking is an important skill. You think that people do think that conspiratorially about LGBT people? Like, yes, we all have secret meetings every month on the full moon. Some people do get pretty crazy with the conspiracy theories. Like, just the idea, like it's a legitimate idea among a certain group of people that feminists want to feminize men or some shit like that. Like that's like they actually believe that. When I first heard about asexuality, I thought it made no sense, but after a while I realized, of course, that's a thing. Like, people can be heterosexual, homosexual, pansexual, bisexual, so why not? Yeah, I mean, at this point, to me, it doesn't even seem very controversial. But there was a time where I just didn't understand it. But I don't have to understand it. I don't understand a lot of stuff. Another big thing about it is it doesn't hurt anybody, and that's something that is very interesting to me. A lot of people have very strong opinions about things that literally harm no one. What do you think about people who say Stephen Hawking is free now that he's dead? To me, it has undertones of it's better to be dead than disabled. I think it's pretty tone deaf. And Stephen Hawking, I didn't know what it was like, his life was like, but he seemed to be a pretty happy person. But yeah, I don't. I think it's tone deaf. I feel like it's probably no harm is meant by it, but it's just, sometimes you gotta think about stuff before you say it. The idea, at least to an able-bodied person, is that you would rather not be disabled than be disabled, and I guess that's just the the tone behind it. But I don't think that they're implying that it's better to be dead than disabled. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely insensitive to, you know, you gotta, so you just gotta think about stuff sometimes. I haven't, like, I don't know. I think that's one of those things that people are complaining about more than it's actually happening. But I don't know. I don't pay attention to everything. I don't, like I said, I don't understand asexuality, and I will never make an attempt to try to explain it. But all I need to know is that it's a thing. I mean, people who would like to take on the challenge of explaining it to people would, that'd be very interesting to me. But, and I suppose that I could study the science behind it if I wanted to. And just like everything, it's nuanced, based on my limited research in it. It's not just like one thing. Like, some people are asexual and aromantic. Some people are asexual but still enjoy to be in loving relationships. Some people are asexual and still have sex. And some people are demisexual. I don't know if that's still a term, but that was a term that people used back in the day, which is like kind of like asexual, but sometimes they meet a person that they feel close enough to or attracted enough to, I guess, to do that. If you define, if libido is the desire to have sex, then I would say that the desire to have sex is different from sexual attraction to other people. So I can imagine that those things don't have to coincide. But like, I know of like, I imagine that even if you aren't sexually attracted, that having sex probably still feels good to some extent. So you may do it just for that. Are we gonna stream for about 20-30 more minutes, guys? Stream kind of flew by today. At least for me. I don't know if it did for you. Asexuality, just like everything else, is complicated. Even heterosexuality is complicated. Homosexuality, bisexuality, it's all complicated. Sexuality is complicated. Let's just leave it at that. I think it's worth it to if you care, it's worth it to just read read experiences from asexual people. I was fortunate enough to really to like interact with a lot of asexual people on Tumblr, and also there's like a wiki about asexuality and other related orientations that has a lot of interesting info on it. But that's what we try to avoid. We try to avoid explaining other people's experiences when we just really don't know anything about it because we don't experience it. Or that's what I avoid. That's what I think we should avoid, at least. I don't think you necessarily need to learn everything, but if you're interested, I think it's a very enriching thing to do and very enlightening thing to do. For Hawking just survived so long with ALS is really fascinating. Most people don't survive that long. I would guess that him still being recognized as a human being with value prolonged it. Maybe. Stephen Hawking was definitely an extraordinary person. Like, I feel like, I mean, he's just like one of those people that's just gonna be remembered by history for sure. There are like very few people that I think we are lucky to have been alive to witness, and I think that's one of those people. Yeah, I don't. Who knows? It seems like there's something extraordinary about him. I mean, maybe it was just genes. Why some people have a problem with things that don't hurt anyone? Well, I don't know. I think that sort of what we were talking about before, people are just afraid of things that are different and the things that they don't understand, and they just sort of have to find a way to reconcile with themselves about things that they don't understand. And a lot of times that comes in the form of hostility or fear. And also a lot of times it's due to different dogmatic beliefs, particularly religion. Religion is a big offender here. Yeah, I don't think it's correct to really try to come up with a reason why someone did or didn't die. Like that just is a that's just so much conjecture at that point. Like I don't it's not even realistic. There's studies that say like, optimistic or positive people live longer and stuff like that, but you can never argue for any specific case. Like this is specifically why this happened and not this. Like that's just getting into way too much speculation. But yeah, people just don't like when things change up what they're used to. When people start seeing things that they're not used to, when things start changing, when the world starts changing. I think everybody's a little bit like that, but at the end of the day, you have to learn how to accept things, especially if they're not hurting anybody. That's like a big thing. Well, even if the illness is your fault, I don't think it's useful to say that. Like, how does that help? But it seems, I don't know. It's just not a useful thing to say. It's just kind of being an asshole at that point. I wish people were more open minded. Me too. Yeah, I think that sort of closed mindedness is definitely more common in older people. Because I do think that the older you get, the more set in your ways you are. But I feel like that doesn't diminish your responsibility to be like a compassionate, open minded human being. I've actually become more open minded the older I've gotten. Because I don't know, I was pretty like strictly principled not too long ago, like maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I was like, this is the way it is, and this is what I believe, and I'm not straying from it because this is what I think is right. And I've become a lot more fluid and open to a lot of different ideas and stuff the older I've gotten. I'm not old, so maybe there's still time for me to become like a grumpy old asshole, but so far it's been like the opposite progression than you might think. How was your first attempt at driving? I'm a teenager who is starting driver's ed. My first attempt at driving, I remember when I first started to drive, I thought it was really hard. And I thought I would never, I thought I would never get it. It just seemed very hard to me. It was like, I can't make this thing do really what I wanted to do. And there's so many fucking knobs and buttons everywhere. I don't know what to do. And there's so many rules on the road and stuff. I can't remember all this shit. Um, but it's just a thing. You keep doing it and you get good at it. That's the thing about almost anything, you just keep doing it, and eventually you just get comfortable and you just get better at it. And driving is just like that. You just literally just keep doing it, and eventually it just becomes second nature. You don't even have to think about it anymore. I did fail my first driver's test, mainly because I didn't come to a complete stop at stop signs, which nobody does. But you should do it when you take your test. So I failed the first time, but I got it the second time. And honestly, like, I don't know. But yeah, you just get better over time. The older I get, though, the more anxious I am about driving. I just become like just a anxious, fearful person. Like the older I get, I'm just like scared of danger. Public transportation is really good if you live somewhere that has good public transportation. I unfortunately do not live somewhere that has good public transportation. Yeah, I think my mom learned how to drive, in her late 20s or something. Yep, everything is more complicated than most people give it credit for. It's not currently like raining or wet like it usually is, but it looks like it's about to rain. So that's kind of an improvement. Usually when I do these streams, I talk about the weather and it's almost always either raining or wet. But it's like really dark. It's not dark, but it's like too dark for 4 p.m., which is what it is right now here. So that means, the sky's very cloudy, so it's probably going to rain. I never actually took driver's ed like a class. My mom and my dad taught me how to drive. And really all it is just kind of basically learning the rules of the road, which is fairly simple. You can kind of do that just by studying. But also just learning how to control the vehicle and make it do what you want to do. As long as you can drive straight and take a turn, you're good. Depending on where you live, you might need to learn how to parallel park, which is probably the most challenging thing to do with a car. But it's very satisfying when you do it. Yeah, that's true, Conrad. If you don't drive frequently, you do kind of get rusty. Like I had a period of maybe like 3 years where I didn't have a car. And then I finally got one and I was like, well, this is weird. I forgot how to do this. Like you don't really forget, but you are kind of rusty and a little shaky. But I've been driving for a couple years now and I'm back to my old form. You have a song that always stuck in your head. Not always, but it kind of depends. Every now and then I'll hear a song and then it'll get stuck in my head for like a week. And then I'll be good. And then a few days later, I hear another song. Like, I remember after I saw the Lego movie, that Everything is Awesome song was stuck in my head for like a month. Everything is awesome. Yeah, I have driving anxiety, which is weird because I never used to, but I definitely do now. Like I try not to drive on the highway if I can help it. Luckily I live in a city where you don't really have to drive on the highway ever. But yeah, I'd usually rather not drive if I can help it. But as a person with stuff to do, you often have to drive. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the days of driverless cars. I got into an argument with my friend, not an argument, but we had some like very strong differing opinions on the subject of driverless cars because he likes cars a lot and he loves driving and it like makes him feel good and it's just he's an enthusiast. So he said he's not really enthusiastic about driverless cars sort of taking over because he wants to drive. But for one, not just because I don't want to drive. For one, it's just going to be safer. Like automobiles kill a lot of people every year. It's a really high number. That's way too high. So that's sort of the main reason why I back it. But you know, there's probably going to be some kind of situation where you'll still be able to drive if you want to. You know, like maybe there'll be like a separate lane for driverless cars or separate lanes for cars with drivers. I have a theory that truly great songs don't stick to your head because it won't rely on repetition to keep you interested. Uh, I mean, I don't know. I think there are many songs that I would say are great that are repetitive just because most popular music is repetitive. For example, Hey Jude by the Beatles, I think that's a great song. And I don't know if you heard that song, but basically the last 8 minutes of that song is the same lyric over and over again. Of course, driverless cars will mean no one can drive their own car anymore. That's why no one is allowed to ride horses anymore. That's actually an interesting point. I don't know if it's exactly a one-to-one comparison, but I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I get anxious as a passenger too, but I'm definitely less anxious as a passenger than a driver. I don't know if you're allowed to ride horses like on the highway. I don't know if that's actually a thing. You can ride horses, but like for example, can you like get off the exit with a horse and ride down the highway? I feel like you can't do that. Do I like big dogs or small dogs? I like medium-sized dogs. Like beagles. But yeah, they I guess maybe people who are car enthusiasts will just have to ride around on tracks and stuff or just take like back roads or something like that. But like my friend that I was talking about, he likes sports cars. I like sports cars too actually, but he likes sports cars. He likes driving fast. So he's going to be pretty upset. Like he'll have to take his car to the track. Yeah, they will not be able to drive on the same road. Like that can't happen. I don't think that'll work. That's why I was saying maybe there'll be a separate lane separated off from the highway that either only driverless cars are allowed on or only cars with drivers are allowed on. Big dogs are cool, but they're just too big, man. They like jump on you and stuff, and it like actually hurts. It's like, yo. And little dogs are sometimes just like, they're usually like just way too like rambunctious, and they bark a lot usually. Like if I could find like a little dog that was just super chill and didn't like fucking go wild, then that would be cool. Couldn't we have cars that have a sort of autopilot option? Well, yeah, but we would still, it would probably still be a problem if the ones that were on autopilot were on the same roads as the ones that weren't. All right, I'm gonna leave in like 5 minutes, guys. Thank you guys for coming to my stream as always. So maybe like one last question if you got that, or comment or story. Make sure you follow me on social media if you'd like to. I have a Twitter. I mostly just ramble and post nonsense on Twitter, but I use it pretty frequently. Yeah, like one of my ex-girlfriends had this huge fucking dog. I don't even know what kind it was. But it was a huge dog that liked to jump on people and like scratch people, and it was like actually like really like annoying. But some people are into that. I'm just not. I don't want dogs to jump on me. Like I don't. It hurts. The HB 620. No, I haven't. I'm not sure what that is. ADA, Education and Reform. Interesting. Is that a bad thing? Oh, it could undermine the ADA, so that sounds like a bad thing. I know there's like sort of this campaign to get rid of the stigma against pit bulls. I haven't hung out with too many pit bulls, but I've met a lot of nice pit bulls. Honestly, most dogs are nice unless they're like treated like shit. But a lot of them are just out of control and just hard to deal with just because they're not trained well, or they're just too energetic or too loud. But I haven't met too many dogs that will just straight up attack you or just be mean. Usually that only happens if the dog is like neglected or specifically like trained to be mean. In my experience, at least. Honestly, when I was growing up in my neighborhood, there were a lot of dogs that were sort of neglected. Like people got dogs as like accessories. It's really common, at least like in the hood, like in black neighborhoods like I grew up in. It's common for people to get dogs as just like an accessory, and they don't really like hang out with the dog or or, you know, give it any affection. They just sort of chain it up in the backyard. And that's how a dog just becomes disgruntled and mean. Do I like cats? Not really. Cats are annoying. I have met some cool cats. I've met a very small number of cool cats. Most cats I've met have been basically assholes. I would say like the vast majority of cats that I have met have been assholes. Yeah, I mean, there's so many people in my neighborhood growing up. Literally, they just leave their dog in the backyard all day. Like, what the fuck is the point of that? But you are a cool cat. Well, I'd like to think so. I'll be leaving now. I'm gonna leave too, actually. It was a good stream today, guys. I'll be back next Sunday, probably. That's the plan. Every Sunday around 1 p.m. We started at 2 p.m. Central Time this time, but usually it's 1 or 1:30 p.m. Follow me on Twitter. Check out my mugs. theonejanitor.com/store. There's also some other stuff there you can check out. If you would like to support the stream in a long-term way, or support me or support my channel, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 a month goes a long way. Thank you for everybody that dropped a super chat. As always. And I guess that's about it. I should have a video coming relatively soon, a few days, hopefully less than a week, but we'll see. So keep an eye out for that. If you didn't see my last video, I made a video like a couple days ago. Some more. It's kind of like a Q&A video, but not really. Just check it out. Go check it out. Anyway. Thanks once again. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.